Let's just talk first of all about this asylum hotel, this ruling in Epping at the Bell Hotel. This was the start of a lot of protests after allegations were made of sexual assault allegedly carried out by two men in that hotel. One of those is, certainly both are live cases. One, a case that's actually in the courts right now and has been this week. Not disinformation, as it's claimed in the court today, certainly in terms of what the jury is hearing. But they're saying, look, this is setting a dangerous precedent and we shouldn't be moving these people out of hotels. Should we be moving them out of hotels or not?
No, we shouldn't. And we absolutely have to have a proper strategy for stopping people coming. We did have that with the Rwanda scheme.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't.
We did.
It's a load of nonsense.
We did.
No, we didn't. Moving 200 people to Rwanda wasn't going to stop people getting on boats.
It was going to be a significant impact in terms of people knowing that they would be refused entry on a permanent basis to the UK. We spent a lot of money on it. Julia, I served on the committee. I was in Parliament. I know the
250 people.
It was
250 people being sent to Rwanda was not going to deter 28,000 people arriving.
Look, it was not going to be 250. The scheme never had a chance to get going. It was scrapped, right? It was not a perfect scheme, but it was a way to deter people from coming to the UK because it was a powerful message to say to them, you will not be able to permanently settle in the UK.
But they would.
You will
because
be
there was no plan to upscale the scheme.
Third-party country.
There was no plan to upscale the scheme. You know that as well as I do.
The inherent merit of the scheme is such that the Labour Party is now scrabbling, for instance, grovelling to the Prime Minister of Albania in May to see if he would be a partner to the scheme, and he refused because he's already doing the same with Italy. Yeah. So we're going to have to disagree on this. Was it a perfect scheme? No. But it was a policy that had an opportunity and the chance to work. Labour scrapped it. And the bigger issue is that they don't have a plan B. They are now intending to disregard local housing need and put asylum seekers into much needed local authority housing, take over private residential areas to create houses in multiple occupation. This will exacerbate community tension.
And that's my view.
It will cause a great deal of anger.
But the main thing is that for the Home Secretary, you lose that one place of focus where we've seen protests and it's been across the newspapers, and you can just spread these people out and they just hope we won't notice. So you're saying you don't want them in the hotels, but you don't want them in the local community. Do you then support Nigel Farage's policy? It's certainly not the policy of your party as a Conservative. Not now, maybe at some point in the future, of putting these people into detainment camps.
Yeah, I think it's the only way we can deter people from coming and break the business model of the evil people traffickers is to do that, because at the moment we have a very significant problem with lack of housing. The ministers constantly tell us that they are communicating and collaborating with local authorities, with the NHS, with the police. They're not at all. They're dumping large numbers of these young men who are waiting for an asylum determination into local communities. They're ignoring elected representatives such as Epping Forest District Council. And just to come back on the specific point you raised, Julia, they haven't got a leg to stand on in this respect because they did not seek planning permission. And they are not above the law. Everyone else has to seek a change of use planning permission. They didn't, and they have to suck it up, frankly. And those other asylum hotels or hostels across the country in a similar position will also find themselves at odds with planning law and will more likely have to close as well. That is the law.
But hold on a minute. They're only going to do it. So, for instance, I mentioned earlier, I live in North London, Labour-run council, Camden. There's an asylum hotel I only discovered a few weeks ago. It's short walk from my home. But I don't think the Labour Council is going to want to close it down because presumably they knew it was happening. They didn't bother telling local residents. They'll tell us about a cycle scheme, but not that. Obviously, it wasn't in the local paper or anything. But Conservative councillors had a meeting on Zoom with Kemi Badenoch, your Tory leader, this week, basically saying, look, we want you to challenge these hotels. We know Reform are doing that as well. But if you do that, they're not going into detainment camps. They're going to be going into the local community.
Well, you have to balance the greater good of the general public and public policy. And I do think that the government now is in a terrible mess. The people that they say they've removed are voluntarily
No, that's not. No, but that's not the point. You said you want them out of the hotels, but you don't want them in local accommodation. Well, that's the only other option under this Labour government. So which do you want then?
Well, the Conservative government, which wasn't perfect by any means in this area, in this policy area, did look at Ministry of Defence, disused Ministry of Defence facilities and other public accommodation facilities, disused hospitals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know they did, but we never got there. In terms of, we've got a Labour government until 2029, realistically.
Julia, if you give me the chance.
Well, but you're not answering the question I asked you.
I am attempting to answer the question. Bear with me. I mean, I know you're a North London Liberal from Camden, but please bear with me.
That's what I'm
saying is we're in a national emergency and a national crisis. So first of all, I think they have to disapply the European Convention on Human Rights because it is a national...
It's not the question I asked you. We can come on to that. Answer the question I asked you. You said you don't want them in their hotels. Your party leader is saying get them out of their hotels. But you know they're not going to be detained and they're not going to go to Rwanda. They're going to go into local accommodation. And you say you don't want that. So which is it? Do you want them in local accommodation or do you want them in hotels?
I want them in an alternative accommodation, such as former Ministry of Defence.
Yeah, but the government's not going to do that. Labour's not going to do that.
That's what I'm saying. That is my position.
So, given the two choices we have, would it be better for the Tories and the Reform not to push for the closure of these asylum hotels, so that these people are not spread out in the community? We don't know where they are, and using up scarce private rented accommodation.
No, because it's an issue of public trust and accountability. This government was elected on the basis of closing asylum hotels. They're increasing the number of them. They're also surreptitiously moving people into social housing stock and HMOs. And this is fundamentally, politically, morally, ethically, economically, socially wrong. And therefore, they have to, as a matter of emergency, disapply the ECHR. They need to very quickly, if they can put a Nightingale hospital up in less than a week, they can put a Nightingale barracks up. I'm not talking about uncivilised, indecent behaviour to these people. I'm talking about it being a national emergency. That's my policy. Yeah. It is not yet the policy of my own party. I hope it will be. But the current situation is unsustainable. This government was elected on a mandate to deal with this issue. It rightly criticised the former government for its inaction and lack of policy imagination on this issue. It now has 14 months to do something about it, and it hasn't. It's got no policy, and it needs to act with a degree of alacrity and emergency, because this is a national emergency.
But they're not going to. We know that. This is not in their psychological, mental, intellectual makeup. This is not where they stand on this. Sounds to me like you actually are supporting Reform's policy on this, as announced by Nigel Farage this week.
Well, yeah, I am, yeah. It doesn't mean I'm a member of Reform, but, you know, sometimes Labour does something that I will agree with. Very rarely the Liberal Democrats do, but the Labour Party do, Reform does. And you have to, that's what politics is about. If someone says something that you agree with, we're not a bunch of playground kids, we're a tribe. You know, in the national interest, that is the best thing to do at the moment.
What do you make of this report by the Refugee Council? It's recommended to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, my God, she's probably going to agree to this, to end the use of migrant hotels. They said you could get rid of them basically by March, because something like, I mean, a huge percentage of those people who arrive here are from Syria, Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, and saying that those particular 5 nationalities who've got a very, very high rate of acceptance, I think 4 out of 10 of those who are actually coming across of those nationalities, or claiming to be, they've got such high asylum success rates, you may as well allow them, you know, temporary leave to remain. They say with a lot of, security vetting, of course there will be, not. They should be allowed to go to work legally, pay tax, rent their own homes while their claims are being processed. Can you see anything wrong with this policy? Apart from everything.
That's a deeply ironical question, Julia. I mean, it's a bonkers proposal, and what you expect from the Refugee Council. I mean, their policy can be summed up by open the doors to the whole world, irrespective of anything. You know, what this does is absolutely undermine the real the real faith and trust people should have in the immigration system, that we will let people in who have an abiding and enduring fear of violence and being treated badly by their home country, and to throw the doors open to everyone. First of all, in terms of public expenditure, it's crazy. Community relations, it's mad. And I absolutely do not believe the government is in a position to properly vet and do security checks on all these. The proportion of young men is huge. You know, we do not want to open the doors to thousands of people of which we know nothing. It's crazy.
I mean, quite
no
apart
one
from the
would
fact
do
that
it.
this would just be a new market for the smuggling gangs, because, hey, you can come in and work. By the way, don't forget to claim you're one of these 5 countries. You mentioned the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights, I assume you were referring to. There's a lot of demand for even Labour, big wigs saying, look, it's time to deal with the European Convention on Human Rights, whether temporarily suspending it, whether leaving it, whether reforming it. Is that the answer? And is that, necessary but not sufficient, or is it enough?
No, it's not sufficient. But I think in the very short term, we need to disapply some parts of it, because it's being misused by the judiciary to keep people in this country who should be removed, who are criminals, who are a threat to the good order and public safety. And it's being misused. People claiming that they're gay, people claiming that they're subject to political persecution. I mean, it just doesn't work. It was to deal with the horrific aftermath of the Second World War and the Holocaust. The 1951 Convention is in a different era, before mass communications, mass travel, mobile phones, people trafficking gangs. We really need a reset on this. It doesn't mean we're turning our back on the rule of law and international rules-based regimes, but it does mean we have to look out for what's in the best interest of the UK. And at the moment, the ECHR and our activist judiciary, or parts of them, are making it actually unworkable for the UK and actually dangerous.
Well, let me mention just one other final story here, and this is regarding Lord Hermer, and he's the Attorney General, and again another human rights lawyer, big old mate of Keir Starmer, and apparently seeming to have the most extraordinary influence on government policy. Indeed, he's now got basically government lawyers in every department. Basically, you have to flag anything to me that might be a problem. But Graham Stringer is the first Labour MP to publicly come out against the Attorney General, accusing him of putting international treaties above democracy and also trying to seize control of the government's agenda. And one of the interesting things the Attorney General had said back in May, he had to apologise after he'd likened criticism of the European Convention on Human Rights to 1930s Germany, and also, of course, spending tens of billions of taxpayers' money on the surrender of the Chagos Islands. But do you share Graham Stringer, the Labour MP's concerns?
I work on the basis that pretty much everything Graham Stringer says is right. He's one of the very few
strong Brexiteer.
Yeah, he's a top Brexiteer. He's right about Hermer. Hermer's not even won a goldfish at the fair. He's never been elected to anything. He's been planted in the centre of government. He seems to have a veto on most policies. He makes a fetish of international law and international legal regimes. He's not pragmatic and practical in the way that those work in government. And I think he's becoming an embarrassment to the Labour government. And on that basis, I think Starmer, although he's a friend of Lord Hermer's, would be wise to give the portfolio to someone in the House of Commons who is much more accountable, because we don't know, for instance, how deeply involved Lord Hermer was in the Chagos Islands debacle, which is going to cost the taxpayer a huge amount of money. And I think that will be subject of some kind of inquiry in the future, that policy and that decision. But Herman, I think, very clever man, agreeable on a personal basis, but not really the right person to be Attorney General, and too much of a human rights North London Liberal zealot. Yeah. And on that basis, I think he should step aside.
Interesting to that. We started off the conversation about that appeal, the Court of Appeal from the Home Office, and indeed the hotel owners, about the Bell Hotel in Epping. Just had some copy through from the Telegraph saying The Home Office lawyers have said the rights of asylum seekers are more important than those of Epping Council. Making submissions to the Court of Appeal on behalf of the Home Secretary, lawyers for the Home Office said the relevant public interests in play are not equal and are fundamentally different in nature. And the Home Office argued that housing asylum seekers was in the national interest. What do you make of those comments?
Well, it's absolutely insane. It's a sort of ridiculous Alice in Wonderland nonsense from a government that's hugely out of touch, is incompetent, is wrecking the economy, and they don't care about what people think, ordinary voters. For them, all they care about is these international legal shibboleths, and it says a million things that they care more about people who've never paid a penny in taxes to this country, who've turned up claiming to be asylum seekers, but we know they're economic migrants, some of whom are involved in criminal activity. They are more important to this Labour government than honest, decent, tax-paying citizens of all colours, of all creeds, of all backgrounds. And I think this is going to catch up with Labour eventually.
I agree with you on that.
Electoral downfall.
Lord Jackson, really appreciate your